you are particularly bright-eyed and awake for a new mother that just had a child amidst the coronavirus. What was that like leading up to having your first child going through the pandemic?
Yeah, well, first I have switched to decaf only because I had high blood pressure in the end of my pregnancy. And so I'm doing this on no sleep and decaf. So it's a challenge. Well, going into this journey, we obviously had no idea that coronavirus was going to be waiting for us at the end. And so we had made a lot of changes. I quit my job, my career. It wasn't really just a job. It was like an identity as a journalist, a TV news journalist, which I'd done for my entire adult life. We moved from the city to the country. So we had a geographical move, an identity career move, and then found out a week after I quit my job that I was pregnant. And so we were going to be totally changing our lives with a child. So a lot happened in September of 2019. And when we came out to Central Washington, which is where we live now, we used to live in Seattle. It was obviously big change of pace for a lot of reasons. And then boom, like this coronavirus deal comes around. Like we had just taken our baby moon, if people know what that is, your little honeymoon that you take while you're pregnant, in mid-February. And then we got back, and by like 2 weeks later, the entire world had changed. And it was funny because I remember when we were in California on vacation, we knew that this virus was coming around, but like nobody was really taking it seriously yet. And there certainly was no talk of like a lockdown. I remember a friend of mine saying a few weeks after we got back, like, California had done this, it's going to happen in Seattle. And I was like, no way. Like, that's just locking down parks in Seattle. I mean, how will people, people are like obsessed with going outside and hiking here. There's no way that's going to happen. And of course, like everything is dramatically changed. So that also changed hospital protocol. So we had originally looked into going to a midwife center. We were really interested in like trying to have a natural birth. And pregnancy was really healthy. And you get like a lot more just personalized attention. And so we had sort of moved down that path where we were going to have, they're very close to a hospital if something happened, but basically you're sort of like, it looks like an apartment, essentially. Like you're going to have a baby in a place that's a lot, lower key. You can have a lot more freedom. And the midwives like have a lot of training. They have a lot of tools and a lot of technology there.
And everybody's going to be way more open to you doing the reverse birth or the side birth or the, I want to, follow my own rules. And so you're in this place where the rules are not as strict because the birth is expected to go easy, and then you collide into coronavirus.
Yeah. And so the thing was, though, that was going to end up being a great, like, unexpected positive of all this was because, like, unlike the hospital systems, they can operate a little bit more independently, whereas you're seeing hospitals kind of locked down by standardized protocol where you're a dad, maybe you're not even allowed in the delivery room, or you have to wear a mask, or if you're allowed in the room, you can't leave. Like that was one thing our hospital here locally changed to, was that you could come in, but like Hotel California, you were never leaving. And if you had to leave, you could not come back. And so we were thinking, well, what if there was an emergency, or my husband had to take a phone call and he couldn't get reception and he had to leave and he wasn't allowed to get back. The other thing too is I had, found a doula that she was a photographer and a doula. If you don't know what a doula is, they're just kind of like your therapist through the birthing process. They like bring you food if you need it. They tell you how to breathe. They hold your hand. They also like hold the hand of your husband, because it turns out that guys really like to fix things and they can't fix delivery. Like there's nothing that you can do as a guy to make it really any better other than just like standing there and trying to like empathize with what's going on. But the pain is obviously you have female listeners, like it's hard to explain. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. When I did, now I'm like, okay, this is why you can't really explain it. You just have to go through it. But so that midwife center was a great option for us, because it was like it still was independent, and it was all going to be, gravy with like what we wanted to. We could kind of chart our own course. Now, unfortunately, literally week 38 and a half of my pregnancy, I go into the doctor and my blood pressure is like 140 over 100. And So I'm now facing gestational hypertension. And the problem with that is if your blood pressure goes up even a little bit more, they get afraid that you're going to have a stroke in labor. So then the Midwife Center was no longer an option for us because I needed a lot more monitoring and safety protocols. So we ended up at a hospital in Bellevue, which is on the eastern side of Lake Washington in the Seattle area. And that brought us back again to the COVID deal because now we're in the hospital system and you have to follow the rules. And luckily, the hospital we delivered in allowed our doula still. Our doula wouldn't have been allowed in Central Washington. So that's kind of one of the reasons why we moved. So I would still have my little therapist that was going to come in and take pictures and everything. And then also like they would let you go in and out. So like when I would scream at my husband that I needed an iced coffee in the middle of my contractions, he was allowed to leave and get a nice coffee and bring it back into into the hospital room and not get kicked out for good. So actually it ended up working out fine. Like it was definitely the total opposite of what we had planned because not just with like coronavirus. Oh, I had to wear a mask to push, which is another interesting thing. Like, you're breathing like you're running a marathon, but you now have to wear a face mask over yourself. So that lasted like 2 seconds and I just basically ripped it off. Down to my chin because I just couldn't handle it. I was like, listen, we've all been together all weekend. Like, if you've got it, I've got it. If I've got it, you've got it. Like, we're just gonna just deal with it now. I'm like, I gotta get this thing out.
If I had just been living coronavirus without any without my wife being pregnant, I would be like, I don't know, you're just gonna do what they've always done. But the amount of fear and concern that is, if you are a woman that is thinking about pregnancy, you're already reading every like what to expect when you're expecting. Only now you're reading what does the New York Times think about the way your baby is going to come and what is all the research saying about how dangerous it is. And so I have watched this like proliferation, and then there's all these stories that go along with it. So you were describing the story of hey, my husband might have to leave the hospital and not be able to come back. We were hearing stories, it's since been disproven, so I'm not trying to throw this out there, but we heard a story last week where they were like, if you get tested for coronavirus and your baby tests negative, then they're going to take it away for 2 weeks and you can't even see it. And like, whether or not this is real, it impacts on your brain. Like, oh my God, am I going to not be able to touch my baby for 2 weeks? Were you going through that?
And actually that has happened. That's true. In fact, our hospital, I talked to the charge nurse about that. I think it was maybe been one of the doctors. It's all a blur, but she was telling me that they did have that discussion at the hospital and decided like they would say to you, hey, you have COVID-19. We, are being told to take the baby away. What do you want to do? Of course, the mom's probably going to say no. And then they would just leave it up to the mom. So they said they did have that discussion at our hospital about whether to take the baby away or not, because that is definitely a reality at some places.
Okay, so now you have that. You've just had this experience. What would you have done?
There's no way you're taking no way. First off, I haven't, correct me if I'm wrong. And if somebody's listening and they want to write me and show me the research, I haven't seen that you, first off, I haven't seen like newborn babies as an at-risk group or even young children as an at-risk group for fatality for COVID-19. And the other thing too was like, I noticed the science saying that you're not transmitting it to your baby in utero either. So it's like you have, the baby's been living with you. Its risk of getting it if you had it while it was in you is minimal. And then, okay, so it comes out and now you're breastfeeding it the nutrients that it really needs, right? I mean, this is what builds up a baby's immune system, is essentially like the stuff that you're producing, and you want to take the baby away and give them what? Formula or someone else's donor milk, which is not anywhere near as good for them as a mother's milk, not to mention the bonding time that's really important for, and there's all kinds of scientific research about skin to skin contact immediately after, how that affects baby psychology in the early stages of growth, how it affects mother and postpartum depression. For what? The risk factor of what? I haven't seen the research that shows that there's this enormous risk to an infant to stay with its mom who has COVID-19. I've seen these horror stories of women who have been comatose because of they're so sick that then they have to deliver by C-section and take the baby away because mom is not even able to be a mother. But I haven't seen somebody show me the research that says that the risks outweigh the rewards, to take a baby away from a mom at such a pivotal moment in its development. No, there's no way. We've thought about all kinds of scenarios. I thought I'd give birth at a bus stop before my husband was not going to be in the room with me for my first child. Like, no way. But I have a different, when I look at this virus, I've tried to be very logical about it, read the science, and not fall into the emotional traps, whether that's the media, coverage of it that can be sometimes fear-mongering, or politicians using it to divide people. I've tried to stay really close to like what are the numbers actually saying, and it just, to me, that was a no-brainer. There's no way, and I'm glad we didn't come to that, because I don't think that anyone would have wanted to experience what that would have been like to try to take my baby away. No way.